President Buhari meets Bauchi and Plateau State governors as date for supplementary elections draws closer.
Trial of Justice Walter Onogen continues at the Code of Conduct Tribunal.
(2019) jam tests to affect candidates with biometric infractions.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we continue our conversation on the political class and Nigeria's democracy.
All right, it's commonplace to hear Nigerians refer to the country's first republic with some nostalgia, drawing inspiration, as it were, from the service-oriented leadership of personages such as Sir Ahmadu Bello, Sir Tafawa Balewa, Chief Obafemi Awolowo, Dr. Michael Okpara, and of course, Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe.
Unfortunately, military interventions drew the curtains on the era and that of the Second Republic, dismantling the country's political stability and, to a large extent, her economic progress.
And although many have insisted that the blame should not be placed squarely on the military and that pointing accusing fingers at the civilian population, there is no doubt that Nigeria's journey to her current democratic experience was indeed a difficult one to achieve.
Of course, Kingsley, and despite this common knowledge, recent elections in the country revealed disturbing developments emanating from the actions and inactions of the political class.
The consequences of the conduct of the political class have left many worried over what legacy is in store for the present generation of Nigerians and indeed posterity. Now, in all this, the question that begs for an answer is the plan that the political class has for Nigeria's democratic future, considering their current behaviors.
And now, the need to know this plan has become imperative in the face of accusations that the political class is mainly driven by self-centered concerns, leading to an outcry for national rebirth, reconstruction, and true nationalism. And of course, this informs the continuation of our conversation on the political class and Nigeria's democracy. My name is Kirian Umayo. Thank you for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria for today, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority and the NTA. We are broadcasting live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital city.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. As my colleague Kirian just indicated, this is part two, as it were, of our conversation which began yesterday on Nigeria's political class and the future of Nigeria's democracy. And the prompt, of course, Kirian, for this conversation has to do with the observable lapses in the 2019 general elections, particularly the level of violence, vote buying, and the general tendency, of course, to impact on the peace and credibility and freeness of the elections. And
in the course of our program today, we will attempt to also look at what happened in the early days, of the nation's political life, because it does seem that there is a continuation or repeated actions and inactions by the political class, since then.
Absolutely, Kirian. Of course, Good Morning Nigeria will also bring you complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and others. In the meantime, let's begin the highlights of the morning news. And here is our colleague Fatima Omar Buba with the news. Hi, Fatima.
Hi, Kingsley and Kirian. Good to see you this morning, and you're all welcome to the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has granted audience to the governors of Bauchi and Plateau State as date for the supplementary elections draw closer. The governors, however, made it clear that they did not come to seek for presidential intervention on the electoral process.
The Chief Executive and the Chief Security Officer of the nation, I have come to brief him about the situation in my state surrounding the inconclusive elections. Where a returning officer has made a declaration, only an election petitions tribunal can reverse that. But INEC is attempting to reverse itself in the case of Bauchi. For that reason, there is a need for me to come and brief Mr. President.
You know my passion for peace in my state. It's not about the election, it's about the peace, to ensure that I have a very good peaceful elections in my state. So far, so good. We've had a very, very peaceful election. That was my briefing with Mr.
The supplementary.
The 15-member Policies, Programs and Projects Audit Committee, set up by the federal government and inaugurated by the Vice President last week Friday, has hit the ground running on its assignment. Laolu Akande, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity, Office of the Vice President, says the committee held its first meeting shortly after the inauguration and that more of such meetings will be following until the completion of the assignment before May 29, 2019. He assures Nigerians that the Muhammadu Buhari-led administration is determined to give the people the best of governance.
Next week, but even between now and then, the work of the committee continues because there are other background compilation and consultations that are going on, and the important thing is to just assure the nation that the Buhari administration's second term is going to take off, with detailed programs, detailed policies after the work of this committee has been done.
In the meantime, Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed has urged the people of Kwara State to forge a common front in supporting the just elected governor of the state when he assumed duty. This, the minister said, is necessary to enable him remain focused and govern the state with the promises made as the focus of his administration. The minister stated this at an APC family get-together in Ilorin, the Kwara State capital.
With us. It's easier to destroy than to build. We would be mindful of our responsibility towards the people of Kwara State. We appreciate the huge mandate you're giving us and will live up to expectations.
Trial has commenced in the alleged false declaration of assets by the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onnoghen, at the Code of Conduct Tribunal. This follows the appearance of Justice Onnoghen to answer to the count charge preferred against him. The prosecution counsel, Ali Umar San, tendered Code of Conduct Bureau forms and 5 other documents before the tribunal, seeking to prove that Justice Onnoghen tried to conceal the existence of 5 domiciliary accounts with the Standard Chartered Bank, but only declared his 2 accounts with Union Bank. The first prosecution witness, James Akpala, also made presentations before the tribunal. The defense counsel, led by Adegboyega Awomolo San, objected to admissibility of Onnoghen's Code of Conduct forms of 2014 and 2016, alleging they had been tampered with. The defense also alleged that the prosecution had made advance arrangement of the court processes on 10th January 2019 to charge Onnoghen well ahead of the commencement of investigations. And officers of the Temple of Justice are again tasked to continuously strive to enhance easy access to justice. Acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Ibrahim Tanko Mohammed, made the plea at the commencement of a national workshop for judicial officers administering justice at the lower courts in Abuja.
Insists on the respect for the rule of law. Its principles also advocate the independence of the judiciary, the doctrine of separation of powers, guarantee of fundamental rights, freedom of expression epitomized by free press and media, as well as free and fair elections.
Minister of Education Malam Adamu says the attitude by state governments deliberately refuse to provide counterpart funding for basic education, if not stopped, will force the federal government to make use of the strategy of deducting the money from source. The minister stated this at a media briefing on the efforts of the present administration to provide a total matching grant of 350 billion naira to fund basic education in the country, as against 92 billion naira provided over 6 years by the previous administration. Malam Adamu has also noted that corruption and lack of political will, among other reasons, have been responsible for most states' inability to provide their counterpart fund to enable them access the matching grant provided by the federal government for use.
Muhammad Buhari provided a total grant of 350 billion to basic education in the country. As we said, this is conditional. Unless states pay their own counterpart funding, they don't get anything. The government decided now or from now on to be deducting it from source, so that states do not suffer as a result of the mistakes of their government.
The minister said the grant is for procurement of supply of textbooks in various subjects, construction of classrooms, provision of library resources, and training of teachers. And as the Joint Admission and Matriculation Board JAMB fixes date for the 2019 UTME and its mock examination, the board says any candidate who cannot be identified through biometrics verification will not be allowed to participate in the 2019 Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination. JAMB Registrar Professor Ishak Oluyede said this at a stakeholders meeting on strategic planning and preparations for the supervision and evaluation of the administration of the 2019 UTME in Abuja.
No discretion about it. Anybody who cannot be verified on the biometric cannot write our exam.
Meanwhile, federal government says it is now ready to intensify efforts towards maximizing the hydropower potential of the country. Water Resources Minister was speaking in Abuja as he received the full business case FBC compliance certificate of the Gurara hydropower from the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission, ICRC.
With the policies of government, and we think it's the right way to go, because we can't build such facilities with huge amounts of money and leave them lying fallow.
Well, that's it on the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran, but it has to be after this break.
What's up?
His friends didn't come.
Hey, let's practice.
But you're going out.
Don't worry about me.
Nothing satisfies a mother more than seeing a child grow up. But I know as he sweats, he'll face the risk of germs which can cause skin irritation.
That's why you need the new best ever Dental Cool. Its new advanced formulation with extra menthol protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs and gives your family icy cool freshness.
Growing up needs Dettol protection.
Olúwa ṣẹ́gun fún mi. Ó ṣe mo dúpẹ́ dúpẹ́. Ọmọ àdùn ẹnu.
Àmín.
Ọmọ òní ní kò gbé tí wá kò ń gẹjẹ.
Àmín.
O ò ní kábàámọ̀.
Àmín.
Àbùkù ò ní kàn ẹ́ o.
Àmín ma.
Ayé ò ní rí ẹ mú o.
Àmín.
O ò ní dààmú. O ò ní ṣìrìn.
Àmín.
O ò ní rí mi.
Àmín.
Ó yá wọnú ògo tuntun lọ. Ẹlẹ́dàá mi. Ẹ tàmí ń kọ́. Ṣé ìwọ ti rókun tó gbẹ rí? Kò lè gbẹ bí. Àwọn ò lè sọ̀rọ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀. Ó yá fi sí spíkà. Ẹ̀bùn látọ̀mù mi gbé wá fèmí. Ọlọ́run á ràn yín lọ́wọ́ ẹ̀yin náà lè ṣerú ẹ̀ fáwọn.
Get 5 times your recharge value to call all networks without restrictions. Recharge and dial *234# to enjoy this offer. Available to new and existing customers.
Ìwọ náà borí ẹ̀ wá kó wá gbàdúrà. Á dáa fún ẹ. Ṣé orí bó.
Airtel, the smartphone network. Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us, They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
And now, time for business news. Here is our correspondent, Kunle Adeyeye.
Nigeria's economy in the past 3.5 years came out of recession and keeps growing at an unprecedented rate. A professor of capital market, Uche Uwaleke, said policies like the Economic Recovery Growth Plan, ERGP, diversification plan of the federal government, and different social intervention programs have helped stabilize the economy. He, however, implored government to look inwards by giving greater attention to vocational education to sharpen the skills of the youths who constitute the larger percentage of the population.
For economic recovery, yes, to a large extent that has been met. If you also look at some other macroeconomic indicators, I would also say we've made some progress. Talking about exchange rate stability, the inflation rate has also come down considerably thanks to the monetary policies put in place by the Central Bank of Nigeria. So for me, these are positives. And of course, you rightly mentioned the ease of doing business, which also improved.
Similarly, an economic analyst, Uzoma Obiyo, has appealed to the federal government to sustain the revolution being witnessed in the agricultural sector of the economy. He said if the pace at which the sector is moving is sustained, Nigeria in no distant time will be among countries like the Netherlands, Brazil, Argentina, and the United States that carve a niche in agriculture.
Agriculture is key. Agriculture President is very passionate about agriculture. And if you noticed, Nigeria has never been self-food sufficient within the last years. Right now, a lot of food, a lot of products are coming from Nigeria. The poultries that we never had has increased.
And next is graphic representation of Monday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Thank you, Kunle Adeyeye, for that business report. Now, next is newspaper review.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoebe is right here with us in the studios. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kyrian.
You're welcome, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Kyrian. Let me begin. Of course, you have stories on politics and indeed other matters dominating the front pages of the papers this morning. Let's take a look at the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune, above the nameplate, you have the headline, 9th National Assembly. APC Senate presidency hopefuls lobby PDP lawmakers. And beside that, deny your child access to education, go to jail. Federal government tells parents. That's on page 36. Now, below the nameplate, it said, my assets declaration forms tampered with. Onore tells Code of Conduct Tribunal. Ekiti to conduct psychiatric tests on rapists and publish their photos. That's page 9. Now, lead story says petition against Buhari, that's the kicker. Atiku assembles over 400 witnesses and 20 senior advocates of Nigeria. With the number of riders to that, Buhari's posturing on supplementary election confirms presidential poll was rigged. That's a claim by PDP. Inconclusive polls. Bauchi and Plateau governors visit Buhari. Details can be found inside the paper. Nobody can handpick a governor for Rivers, says Abe, and gunmen killed garrison commander in Bauchi.
All right, let's go to the Nigerian Pilot. The Nigerian Pilot newspaper. Below the nameplate, we have two stories there. Onogen accuses federal government of doctoring his assets declaration form. It's on page 9. Now, Kajuru people in Kaduna demand immediate release of detained chiefs and leaders. It's on page 6. And now, the main headline of the Nigerian Pilot this morning, INEC under fire. As Bauchi does for it right as now, as Bauchi's Plateau governors attack electoral umpire. I would drag commission to court, Governor Abubakar threatened. Says president's interference not necessary. Decision on Plateau poll unnecessary, Governor Lalong laments. Meets Buhari to pour out grievances against INEC. The story is on page 8. And now below the photograph on the Nigerian Pilot, we have Atiku files petition at Electoral Tribunal, asks to be declared winner of presidential election. Page 5 is where you get that story. And at the bottom of the Nigerian Pilot, we have some stories. Court grants EFCC leave to amend charge against ex-SGF Babachir Lawal, and that's and others. Is on page 9. Now, expert says Nigeria isn't ripe yet for electronic voting. It's on page 11. Okorocha debunks allegation of 17 billion naira withdrawal from Treasury. It's on page 6. Also on page 6 is call to war claims 5 lives at Federal Polytechnic Owerri. And finally, supplementary elections. INEC tasks security agencies on cooperation. Let's bring in Bayo at this point.
Yes, thank you, Kirian. Let's start with the development at the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal. The presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, and the party have filed a petition at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. The petition filed yesterday, 19 days after a winner was declared. In the petition, the former vice president is asking the tribunal that he be declared the winner of the February 23rd presidential election. And secondly, in alternative, the PDP candidate and the party, they are praying the Presidential Petition Tribunal to nullify the poll and order fresh elections in accordance with the electoral law. The respondents are the President-elect, President Muhammadu Buhari, and the All Progressive Congress, as well as Independent National Electoral Commission. In another development, the governor of Bauchi State, Mohammed Abubakar, has briefed and secured the endorsement of President Muhammadu Buhari to challenge the cancellation of rescheduled elections at Tafa Balewa constituency in court. INEC initially declared the governorship and the state assemblies in election in Tafa Balewa constituency inconclusive, but after an inquiry, INEC approved the resumption, conclusion, and announcement of the result, earlier declared inconclusive. On the one hand, the People's Democratic Party says INEC lacks the power to cancel election duly conducted and validly collated. On the other hand, the All Progressive Congress says that the Constitution, the electoral law, and INEC guidelines that empowers only a court to revise the decision that's been pronounced, particularly when election results have been collected and declared by a returning officer. Result of 13 registration areas, 7 related to the governorship and 6 related to state assemblies, are the basis of the dispute there. The sad development you refer to, Kirian, is resurgent in Cold War. At the Federal Polytechnic in Nekede, 10 persons, mostly students, have been killed in the Cold War. This is a war between a group that is called itself Aye and the other Baga. They reported that for about 10 days, they have been in a serious clash, and the management of the Polytechnic has now imposed a curfew on the place. The village where the Polytechnic is, the people in there are saying that their life is in danger. That is Umu Dibia. And they say that the boys of different call groups are on the rampage in the city. Similarly, in Calabar, there is a group, call groups are also on a rampage in an area called Nasarawa Bakoko in Calabar, the Scorpions and Skylo cult have also allegedly been in war, and their war has claimed about 6 lives. First, there was a clash, claimed 1 life. The police made some arrests, and reprisal followed, and the deaths increased. Meanwhile, the spokesman for the police in Cross River State, Mr. DSP Irene Ubo, has confirmed the incident. Security personnel of the mobile police and the military have been dragged to the place to ensure that law and order maintains. You see, cult increase. In fact, it's so worse that in some states, including Kwara State, it's got to as low as some secondary schools.
Right. In fact, reprisal attacks have always been the modus operandi of cult groups, especially in higher institutions of learning. But I had thought that the issue of cultism has even reduced. You know, I wonder why it is creeping in again.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. Indeed, I mean, what Bayo is saying is that the incidence of cultism has spilled from the institutions of learning to the streets. To the streets. You find artisans and so on and so forth. You hear that they belong to cults. I don't know whether if you belong to a cult, that will make you a better professional, whether it will make you a better bricklayer or a better mechanic. And that's the way they delete each other from time to time whenever they have their bust-ups.
They do this for protection and some kind of power, you know, within their domain.
What kind of power?
What kind of power are you saying?
Students go to school to learn, and then you join cult group to win power for what?
Make you more brilliant or what?
If not for power, why do they engage in physical combat by using arms and ammunition?
Yes, misguided.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
All right, so let's turn to the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper above the nameplate. It says 5 firms bid for Afam and Yola power companies. That's page 27. Now, out-of-school children's parents may face trial. We read that earlier from the Tribune. And then Shehu Yaradua Foundation and others to lose 4.8 billion naira properties. And also there on the front page of the Punch newspaper, well, the Punch is coming up again with this kicker. It's saying runoffs. We don't have a runoff yet, because right at the foot of the front page there's a more appropriate kicker for that. It's a rerun, actually. APC and PDP woo voters with money, gifts, and lobby other parties. And Bauchi and Plateau governors visit Buhari over inconclusive polls. Details on page 2. And now going to the foot of the front page of the paper, that's the Punch newspaper, taking that from the right, you see that the rerun. We don't take orders from anybody, INEC tells APC. That's on page 23. Now, 6 killed in Cross River court and communal clashes. 10 killed in Imo court clash. That's page 5. Protesting guards and cleaners shut down Federal Medical Center in Makurdi. That's just the cult issue we're discussing a while ago.
Exactly.
And I remember, Bayo, yesterday we made the distinction between supplementary rerun elections and runoff. I think this is a sub-editing issue, you know, production sub-editor, rerun and runoff. We don't have a runoff yet.
No.
Yes.
All right, now to the New Telegraph newspaper. New Telegraph newspaper, above the nameplate, CBN, Nigeria spends $500 million yearly on palm oil import. This is unbelievable. All right, now, below the nameplate of the New Telegraph, we have other striking stories. Inconclusive polls. APC governors rush to Buhari on page 4. My assets declaration forms tampered with on Ogen on page 5. 2 injured as building collapses during demolition. It's on page 6. Now, court admits dead man's statement in Fayose's trial. It's on page 33. And the lead story, the New Telegraph, is 25 defected senators lose re-election and go back bids. With 2 riders, only Melaye Omoagege survived in APC and PDP. And then Saraki Akpabio, Uba, Nyako, Gamade, top losers chart. It's on page 3. Now, below the photograph there, we have declare me president-elect or nullify Buhari's victory, Atiku tells tribunal. As PDP assembles 400 witnesses, 20 sounds for legal battle. Let's bring him by again.
Yes, let's talk about the story you mentioned about palm oil. You recall, years back, Nigeria was one of the lead palm oil producers in the world. Then Malaysia came and sought seedlings from Nigeria, and we overtook Nigeria, and sometime we found out we were even importing oil palm from Malaysia. Now, the central bank has begun a partnership initiative, and it is doing that with 11 states. 11 states. These are states in the south-south and southeast. You recall that the central bank started the Anchors Borrowers Program, which has enhanced the rice production in the country to the extent that we produce about 95% of our domestic requirement now. And so this initiative was led by the central bank, and they had a meeting, and the intention is to set a model to stimulate investment in oil palm plantation as to increase Nigeria's global share within the period of 3 to 5 years. Central Bank Anchors program has boosted rice. The federal government initiative is taking another stride with wheat production in Jigawa and Yobe State. And with this development, it is hoped that the initiative to have self-sufficiency in food production will be on the increase. Sadly, another building collapsed in Lagos. This time it was at Egreton Road at Okearin, Lagos Island. On Sunday, officers of the Lagos Island Building Regulatory Agency came and marked 3 structures meant for this demolition. A trader said he had goods in 2 of the buildings, and therefore he pleaded for time to evacuate his goods, and they demanded 100,000. He could only afford 30,000, but they declined. And so they came and removed the roofs from one of the structures. He quickly got people and evacuated his goods from that structure. On Sunday, he got people, and on Monday, they were evacuating goods from the second structure. When the demolishers came, they started on the first building. They left it and came to the second building. And in the process, they demolished the pillar and demolished the structure on themselves and his goods. Luckily, there were no lives lost, according to the man. The 4 persons have been rescued, but his goods, he says they are worth about 6 million, are trapped in the rubble there. So that proves that there has been some underhand relating to structures that are marked for demolition with the officials and those, the owners. You know, when that one collapsed last week, there were allegations that many of the structures that have been marked for demolition were being delayed because of some underhand negotiations going on between the officials and the landowners.
Yes, it's normal. But let me take you back to that issue of palm oil, Kingsley, because the importation of palm oil to the tune of $500 million annually, for me, it's unfortunate. You talked about Malaysia that came down here. What about Indonesia? Indonesia has even gone to the next level of trying to get biofuel from palm oil. So, and again, in the southern part of Nigeria, in Benin, in fact, in the whole southeast of Nigeria, we have this in abundance. And there are some palm plantations that have been abandoned for several years. We recall Opera started it in the southeast of Nigeria. And today, most of those palm plantations had been abandoned.
Yes. If you are coming from Benin along the road towards Auchi, we get to a section whereby you see a long stretch of palm plantation.
And they have a research institute in Benin.
If we go back to that, then we will be reviving our industries. Secondly, not only palm. Don't forget, rubber was another great factor. Don't forget about the granite pyramids. So if we are going back to agriculture as the mainstay of the economy, we have the initiatives of the past that we can fall back on. And all the research development agencies we have across the country can come to the aid and revive the nation agriculturally. And we can survive, the economy can survive purely even on agriculture alone.
All right. Gentlemen, the points that you have made are noted. I mean, one cannot disagree with any of the issues raised. But just one point to underscore. Sometimes I get worried when we are confronted with figures of how much we spend on importing certain kinds of items. You have to make allowance for capital flight. Because it is not necessarily all amounts that are bidded for forex that are utilized for that particular purpose. But it is scandalous in the first instance that we are importing palm oil on the basis of what you have described. The research institute is called NIFO. That's the Nigerian Institute for Oil Palm Research. It's on the outskirts of Benin. It was established in the 1950s. It used to be called WIFO. At some point it was called OPROS before it became NIFO. It used to have very good tennis courts in NIFO at the time. But
did you make use of the tennis courts? So
myself. That's precisely the reason why I'm remembering it. But just before we take our editorial, this is part of what I don't know those who are involved in the value chain for palm oil. Now in Malaysia, as we were talking about Indonesia, what I found in Malaysia is that apart from using it for purposes for medicinal research and so on and so forth, they actually have a value chain that is similar to crude oil. Yes. So you have upstream, midstream, and downstream of palm oil. Well, you know, we make a lot of noise about some of these things, and then after a while,
it's just we neglected the science and technology. That's just part of it. Because what they're doing is scientifically driven.
Absolutely.
What they're doing, the
applied science.
Okay, now the
Kirian, sorry, you were asking about tennis in NIFO. There used to be a gentleman in NIFO. He was the senior staff of NIFO. His nickname was Obrigado. He used to play tennis.
But you didn't play. That's what I was driving at.
If I didn't play, how would I know his name?
You were a spectator. All right, now let's go to the editorial for this morning, and it's coming from Daily Independent newspaper. INEC must get supplementary elections conclusive. The Independent National Electoral Commission remains in the eye of the storm as it prepares to conduct supplementary governorship elections in 6 states on March 23, 2019, as well as some state assembly elections. Now, Bayo, please come in here.
Well, first of all, let's establish a distinction, as we tried to do yesterday, between a rerun and reschedule. A rerun comes when there are no clear winners, and therefore the two lead candidates will go for a rerun.
No, that's runoff.
I mean, runoff. All right? But for a rescheduled election, this is an election that is not concluded, and therefore processes are put in place to bring them into conclusion. You will recall that following the March 23 election, INEC there were elections in 29 states. Elections were declared in 22 states. However, 6 states initially had their elections inconclusive, while 2 were suspended. But as at this week, those of Rivers and Bauchi are to be concluded, and the rerun are to be in the 5 states of Sokoto, Adamawa, Benue, Plateau, and Kano. Now, some have even changed the independent name in INEC to inconclusive election, as if to deride INEC. INEC did not create inconclusive election. It is a factor of the development of the electoral process. Right. And it emanated from Section 41 and 43 of the INEC regulation, as well as Section 26 and 56 of the Electoral Act. And the basis is simple, where there is a margin in the lead of the winners, and particularly where there have been votes that have been voided, and this in volume outweighs the margin between the two candidates. And therefore, it is a product of the electoral process. But what the editorial is saying that INEC must get its act together and get its inconclusive elections concluded.
All right. Bayo Atebe, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us today. And of course, Kirian and I will be continuing with the rest of the program. We'll see you tomorrow. You know, Kirian never played any sport while he was in school.
I don't want to be part of your reverie. He used to be in football, now he's coming to tennis.
All right, we'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be dealing with the second part of our conversation on Nigeria's political class and the future of the country's democracy.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election economy. Exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Toba Daba then and Ishak Modibo Kawu now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA standards to be ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space and evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency Corporate. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
And you are still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. Now, we are continuing with the conversation we had yesterday on Nigeria's political class and the impact on the nation's democracy. Let's now take the comments of some guests who were on the program yesterday as compiled by our correspondent, Serafina Ukon.
I think for me, I see it as a mixed bag, because in every setting, of course, you are bound to have the good, the bad, and the ugly. And to me, this is not an exception. Now, but I think I would like to put some context here, that it is often said that whatever you see happening cannot be divorced from the setting, the environment itself. And the political class are a product of their own society. And in many instances, while the blame is pinned on the political class or the politicians, as the case may be, it is also very obvious that the environment in which they operate cannot also be free from most of the things we see as infraction.
The political class we have, to some extent, we need to be blamed. Was this idea of people feeling that, look, I must win election at all costs. We know that elections, you must either win or lose. You have to have a spirit of sportsmanship. Agreed, you cannot work in isolation. As he said, you are a product of a given society. And the behavior of some of these people also affects you as a person. But again, because you are the one seeking election, and sometimes you find politicians trying to use certain traits. For example, it's wrong to see people manipulating religion, manipulating ethnicity to their advantage. You may not be very religious, but when it comes to a political period, you become to look more like a sheikh or like a pastor. And after the election, probably you hardly see them in some of these worship places. So
I think it's obvious that the mischief we are trying to deal with here is the fact that you have a group of people whose permanent or whose attention is to seek power. But in seeking power, they hardly adhere to the rule of the game. They don't adhere to the Constitution. They don't even obey their own Constitution, and they do not even obey the rules set by the umpire.
The Nigerian political system has been so corrupted to the extent that it's a matter of securing political office for you to automatically shift from a position of penury to a position of affluence. And this perhaps explains why the voter, the common man in the society will continue to ask for money instead of service, from those that are representing them. But I think this has its roots from the very failure of the executive system, state system over a long period of time. The failure of local government, state governments, and federal government to provide the basic social infrastructure in the society, creates a huge vacuum that virtually everything that facilitates good life is absent or is lacking in virtually all our societies, especially in the countryside.
So much is spent on recurrent, then a lot of it goes into debt repayment, then very little is left for capital expenditure. And then we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about development, we're talking about service delivery. And as long as we're not giving service, then it factors into why people demand money and vote buying and all of that, all those negative tendencies that we're seeing in practice in the polity will continue to be. So I like to believe that the people themselves must help to enlighten themselves about their sense of obligation and what they should do about the system, and hoping that those who claim the upper class of leadership will also behave themselves and think of the people. The leaders don't seem to think of the people in a way you expect compassion and empathy to come from the upper class. When that begins to happen, we will notice it, we will see it. There'll be fairness, there'll be equity. These things are not just theoretic concepts.
All right, Serafina Ukon, thank you very much there for the excerpts from our conversation yesterday on the topic with our guests from multiple locations, including Abuja. Today, of course, we are continuing, and we have guests with us here in Abuja studios as well as in Lagos. Now, let's begin by welcoming our guest, Chief Achike Udenwa, former governor of Imo State. Your Excellency, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Okay. We also have with us in the studios Senator Olorunimbe Mamora, who is Managing Director and CEO of National Inland Waterways, NIWA. Distinguished Senator Mamora, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
And by the way, Senator Mamora was not just a senator, he was also Speaker of the Lagos House of Assembly for 2 terms.
So he has been
for one term. Oh, for 1 term. Sorry, 1 term. Yes, sorry. For 1 term. Yes. Yes. So it's been around. So he knows what we are talking about in the political class.
And, let's also welcome to the program the former chairman, Kena Local Government Area, Sabo Kena. He was also a former National Publicity Secretary of Hargon. Good morning and welcome.
Morning, Nigeria.
His first name, by the way, is Jibril.
Oh, yeah.
Jibril. We're not sure whether it's from Sudan.
That is an inconclusive. That one is inconclusive.
Yeah. And in our Lagos studio, we are privileged to have this morning Professor Adele Jinadu. He is the chairman, Center for Democracy and Development. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back. By the way, I'm not the chairman of the CDD.
Okay, well, Professor Adele, thank you for joining us from our Lagos Network studios. Let's return to our Abuja studios and also welcome Honorable Darlington Onwokocha. Is a member of the House of Representatives from Abia State. Honorable Onwokocha, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you so much,
Okay.
President.
All right, let's begin. I'm not quite sure, Kieran, I'm sorry, I didn't have enough time to research into this. Back to our Lagos guest. Professor Adele, were you, just by the way, a member of the Political Bureau of 1986?
No, I wasn't. I was not a member.
Thank you very much. But let's get into the pith of our conversation this morning. I'm sure you had the benefit of listening to what our guest said yesterday. Now, the prompt for this conversation obviously has to do with what we have seen with regard to the conduct and the outcome in general of the 2019 elections. I mean, INEC couldn't have been the instigator of the violence that we saw in some parts of the country. INEC couldn't have been the one buying the votes. And people are also asking, 20 years since the advent of our Fourth Republic, why are we the way we are? Tens of millions of Nigerians are jobless. The political economy, it's not been, they argue, not properly managed. And yet we have a political class that is in charge. Why do we have a political class that seems, by its conduct, to imperil our democracy? Let's begin first with His Excellency, former Governor of Imo State.
Thank you very much. I think the political class has changed a lot since independence. We knew our political fathers, the Awolowos, the Azikiwes, the Aminu Kanus, the Shagaris. These were people who came out mainly to fight for independence. They fought for independence. They were dedicated. At that time, you find out they had a lot of local following. Then from there, they passed on to, after the first coup, and then in 1979, a new political class came up. It was a mixture of the old and the new. And these ones were now to start from where the military stopped after that intervention. And from there, we got to the 1983. From 1983, we got to the 1991, 92. I think then the current democracy, we would say, started in 1999. And then this is 2019. So about 20 years now, the current one, democracy has been on. A lot has happened. A lot of good people have left the scene, I know a lot of politicians, very beautiful politicians, who have actually retired voluntarily. There's been, politics has now become a business. It has now become a business. A lot of people who have nothing to do with politics are inside it today. So you find out a lot of money is being spent, a lot of thuggery, the dynamics are quite different from what we used to have. So today, some of the original politicians can no longer cope. They just stay by the side, and now you have a political class that is more of, would I say, grab it all. Anyhow you can get it, that's okay. Anyhow, with money, with thuggery, with all sorts of things. So, and then again, you don't have these strong political institutions. The institutions are not there. Look at our INEC. By now, one would have seen an INEC that is so strong, that is on its own, that is very truly independent. That's what we should expect to be having now. We should also have other institutions, even the political parties themselves. Today, people control the political party, and not political party controlling the politician. So these are some of the distortions you have in the, on the political arena, and it has affected us so much. I better stop there for the meantime.
Okay, well, former Governor Atiku Denwa, you have spoken well, but we also will recall that there are also events of the past, especially the Second Republic, even the 60s, where we also had political violence and what have you. And but presently, the level of a degeneration into political misdemeanor on the part of the political class cannot be overstated, because we have continued to, instead of seeing gradual development upwards, we are nose diving, politically. And I'd like to ask Dr. Mamara to come in here, because you have also experienced leadership in the political class. You were Speaker of the House of Assembly in Lagos State, and of course, you have as well. You are now the Chairman of Center for Democracy. You are now the Director General of National Land Waterways, managing people and resources. Where did we go wrong?
Well, taking cue from where Chief Denwa left, I don't want us to just limit it to the political class alone. I think it's more of attitude of the people in general. Because, yes, the political leadership has a very strong role to play in terms of utterances of leaders themselves, in terms of their body language, which could invoke these negative occurrences, in terms of thuggery, in terms of violence, in terms of ballots, box snatching, and what have you. But I think behind all this is a general attitude of do or die, or attitude of desperation, where the whole essence of politics itself, which ought to be service, has been relegated. Service is a primary thing, is a primary purpose, and of course, because a lot of people, they are no longer driven by the quest for service, but rather for some other motives. A lot of people come into politics for some other motives, and the system or the situation has become the survival of the fittest. If you look at the situation from 1999, when the ministry took charge in terms of midwifing, what we have today, it wasn't like this in 1999. I mean, some of us were lucky when we started, but it's like when we expect that we should get better, I think it's difficult to really say that we have gotten better in terms of the political behavior, And of course, it seems to me that the issue of poverty, the issue of what you can call inverted values, or values that are no longer put in place, societal values that we used to cherish, way back, they don't seem to be there as much now. But then, in all this, for me, it's a passing phase, because democracy itself is a process. It's not a destination. And I believe that we will get there, gradually. But I cannot agree less that we need to strengthen our institutions to be able to react and manage, emerging trends in our polity, whether in terms of discipline, in terms of, respect for the rule of law, in terms of values that we hold dear to ourselves, societal, and national values that we need to hold our family onto. And of course, the rule of law just cannot be overemphasized. It's very, very critical that we uphold the rule of law and apply we have a lot of laws that are just gathering dust there, because it's not having the laws that is just important, but implementation of the provisions of the law is very critical. And I believe that, we shouldn't condemn ourselves too much. Yeah, we'll get there.
All right, Senator Mamora, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Honorable Kiana, former chairman of the Kiana local government in Nasarawa State. What's your opening salvo on what is apparently, a thumbs down for the political class 20 years on?
Well, I think even from the onset, from the questions you've started to ask, the answer you are going to expect will be the routine things that will not give us what I believe are the likely things that have been responsible for the failure of leadership in our governance. I thought the appropriate thing is, where did we really get it wrong? For me, it starts from our beginning. When you adopt a form of life, or governance, or politics, or business that is not rooted in your nature, you stand the possibility of getting it wrong 10 times over. When the contemplations of adopting what is called democracy became the norm, to me, we were just in a dreamland. Because when we set out to adopt what was democracy, we were looking at the Western world as the epitome of civilization, of value systems that are incorruptible. But I think we have learned and know better now that the root of corruption, of failure of our system, goes back to the West. We took democracy and we're supposed to have married it to the spirit of us as Africans, so that you would have now managed, you would have gotten a product that has your spirit, and you are taking the form to keep the spirit going. And if I may make reference to what His Excellency said, when he was making reference to the old people, where did those people get their values of service from? It's from their community. Today, we prop up leadership that are not even known in their communities. And if we say we are the actors are the failures, it's not true. It is what we are practicing that is failing. Because if you go home today, the traditional ruler is still a respected person, because he is still reflecting and representing the spirit of the community. There is an element that is missing in our practice of democracy. Today, we have acceptable political system in China by so-called Western world. It is because China adopted whatever they contemplate as now democracy, rooted in the spirit of the Chinese culture. If you go to Japan today, it is reflecting the Japanese culture. If you go to India today, their democracy is reflecting in their traditional setup. And so, if you go anywhere in the world where there is success, you don't abandon your personality and just go wholesome by the propaganda of what you think looking so glamorous, and you begin to think that is the best way forward. And this is the reason why in the course about 21 years ago, when we were reflecting as young men, much younger people then, we contemplated putting in place what you call Movement for Indigenous Democracy in Africa. Because we needed to introduce the values that are core to our communities up till this moment. You can just reflect in the society today. No matter how much success anybody reaches, he is looking forward to becoming the traditional ruler of his village, or the Ikenga of his community, or the Galadima of his community, or the Chiroma of his community. That is what is dearest to him and most appreciated by his community as an achievement, as an attainment. So what is missing and why the leadership is failing is because when we were doing reforms to put in place our political arrangement, we failed to adapt the spirit that is ours, is original to us, into the system that we were brewing. And therefore, we are always going to begin to be evaluated by the values of the Western world, which we have not grasped properly, because their own culture of responsibility, of obligation, of accountability is different from ours. So we have a political system now that anybody just believes in democracy, and we we jump into this concept of democracy as long as it's convenient for us. Like in the context of what the country is today, once you find issues of restructuring coming in, it is the norm of the dictionary definition of restructuring for the convenience of the political gains for those who are propagating for the moment. So the root of our problem rests with our inability to bring in the spirit of the African person into our democracy. And it has worked, and it has continued to work, because if you go back to the local setting, the failures in leadership is not as dramatic as in the political terrain. So we need then to look backwards and see how leadership must begin to be brewed, groomed, as it were in the 1976 local government reforms, where it is expected that people of integrity are supposed to be given leadership, and you can only do that by the examination by the proponent of your community. You don't wake up in the afternoon and become a representative, or you don't come to Abuja and lobby for appointment when the people at home don't even know your name. So I think we must start introspecting how we must bring certain values that are ours, original to us, and promote it as requirement for leadership in the course of our political development, henceforth.
Yes, Kingsley, what really struck me, when he was making his explanations on this, is the fact that, of course, the adoption of a system that's not rooted in our culture, and of course, a system that is not married to our belief and all that. And that brings in the question of being able to, have experience, try to, develop that experience. We have passed through, we are about 58 years old now as a nation, practicing democracy from parliamentary to presidential system of government. And we have had individuals who have played key role at different levels of governance in this country. So one would have thought that having gone through that ordeal, that we ought to have by now been able to understand the concept of leadership and the concept of governance and the concept of delivering, to the people. Now that brings us to Honorable Darlington Nwokocha. You are of the National Assembly, and we are talking about the political class and the roles that they have played in our polity. What is the key issue for you, knowing full well that in the National Assembly, all is not well, in terms of their own role as part of government?
Well, thank you so much. I think, first of all, we need to talk about, to understand what is political class. Because when you're talking about the class, it's a distinction from one level of operation to another. For instance, in the primaries, you say in class 1, in class 2, in class 3. But when you now refer to political class, you're talking about what components, what are the kind of people are found in a particular class. Because class must have growth to make quite a meaningful status. If you remain in a class and you fail in that class and you're repeating in that class and you find yourself as somebody people will look up to when everybody knows that you're repeating a class, it's not worthwhile. If you limit to another level and people will say, oh, you're doing right, to another class, that's another level. If you fail in a class and you are now going back, still you are maintaining leadership as a political class, people within your confined area will still know. Now, when you now relate this to our society, you now come and find out what are the elements that make up within this political group. The major thing we're talking about in politics, for instance, what we're talking about democracy today, is not all about people that are contesting the candidates, but the electorate as well. When you look at the electorates, prior to this time, so many years ago, you see what are people looking for whenever they want to participate in a particular election. What are those driving factors, instincts that pushes them into certain actions? Is it money? Is it imbalance in the distribution of power? So many years ago, you now find that people were driven by certain imbalances in distribution of power. But today, economic powers, economic interests is driving a whole lot of force, pushing people into action because my brother, because my uncle, because my friend is participating without even minding whether that person is qualified or not. Let me go and push and see how I can support him. Sit that person back and ask him, what is your interest in this? I want my brother to help me to give me contract when he goes in there. Even as a legislator, he may not understand that a legislator's responsibility is not to give out contracts, rather to make the necessary laws that fall within the three principal functions of a legislator. But it's on my mind, I want my brother to be there, I want my friend to be there so that he can make money and give me some contracts. So now, there are certain factors that pushes this political class either way. Now, as a political factor in an area, as a legislator, you find that now ask yourself, what actually do I want in stepping out to run for an election? One, I want to make a character that has a context of emulation. No, I want to go and make money and come back. Most times you see people resigning from very comfortable positions to go and vie for a position, and when they get there, without meeting that their aspiration, they now fall back to say, oh, if I had known. In the next coming election, because he must have or she must have lost the position of he or she was maintaining. You see the person now trying to do something that's inconsistent with the law to make sure they will maintain the position or the status they find themselves. So if you look at the whole thing, you find out what values do we really want to maintain in a society we find ourselves. Today, you see, there are so many things that happen within and among our electorates that when you look at it, you go back to say, is this right? You see people carrying ballot boxes, you see people, and actually, how many of them, when they want to go home, maybe to contest for one position or the other, will go through their guidelines, electoral guidelines, to see, no, do not do this or do not do that. You can imagine in this present election we just held, some people will now go, people that are well competent to even be the president of this country, maybe their people or themselves will go out to start carrying ballot boxes. For what reason? When you know that even if you have 136 polling units within your area and you just make away with 10, it will not make any meaning. And the Electoral Act has already expressly stated it that these places, once you remove one ballot box, they will cancel that particular ballot box, and now election will take place again. So it's something, it's a process that we should educate ourselves, and orientation is very key. And that orientation is not something that must come once because the election is coming around, then we now go into the field that we want to, INEC, please come and do some orientation and whatever. To what extent are we imputing this in our primary and secondary school curriculum? Because as we're talking right now, you now see that we have gotten to a particular age that say, okay, it's only to let this thing be known either through NTA or AIT services. But if the rudiments of the discipline and values are being imputed into our primary school, secondary school, and by the time the person must have passed through these processes and gotten to the level of a university level, it must have been built into that person's character content to say, this is the right thing to do. How many of us now are going back to our homes to now say, where is history as a subject? Because it's through history that we can now find out actually what we ought to do. Well, here we are not getting it right because those things didn't work well. Even the few governments as a subject we were doing, it's no more there for us to draw a comparison between what it used to be, what is now, and what it should be. It's a very difficult thing that we look at all these things and we are not referring it back to the way it ought to be. But I think Nigeria will have a hope that we'll launch into, when the rubber hits the road, we'll launch a better future if we can have a concerted effort to sit back as leaders to say, let's go back and start teaching these things from the rudiment, from the primary school to secondary school to university level.
All right, Honorable Nwankwocha, thank you very much there for your comments. Let's go over to Professor Adele Jinodu in our Lagos Network studios. Professor Adele Jinodu, of course, is a professor of political science. Let's have your thoughts on the behavior of the political class and the quest for power against the background of what we just saw in the 2019 general elections, and more importantly, the utilization of that power in delivering the public goods.
Thank you. I think we're having some interesting discussion here. But I think it is important to point out that what we are talking about is a much more complex set of social phenomena, as it were. And I'm saying that because we seem to be homogenizing what we call the political class, what I prefer to call the political elite. I think we need to make a distinction among various fractions of that political elite and their interstices within the larger population. And why I prefer the use of the political elite, the concept of elite, is that it now shows us linkages between the political leadership, particularly the political leadership, and various other elites like business elite, military elite, and what we now find is a co-optation that we're not just talking of the political elite, but we are maybe talking of what in other places they call political, business, civil service, and professional elite. So I think what we have seen in our own country, and I want to provide some kind of a general picture, is that we have a mainstream political elite whose public statements belie what they actually do. And what they actually do is at variance with the norms of inclusivity, representativeness, accountability, ethics, and so on in public service. And I think what we then have is a dissonance, a gap between systems, processes of systems, and the outcomes. And we tend to place emphasis more on outcomes than on the processes themselves. What do I mean by that? You see, democracy is not just about outcomes. It is also about processes. And the processes are important that we get them right. Now, what I see happening is that the processes are not anchored on what you might call the ethical foundations of the type of system that we have accepted. And because of that, you see definite attempts by the political elite and their surrogates in other aspects of professional life to undermine that whole process in terms of setting up what we expect government to do. Take Section 2 of our Constitution, for example. Section makes it clear that public authorities must provide certain things to secure for human security. And yet we find, every time we find political elites, political leaders particularly, saying that the provisions of Chapter 2 are not justiciable. But that is not the point. It is more in terms of the spirit of it. And and when we look at our educational system, we look at our health system, we find serious human security deficits in those areas. So I think the important point that we need to moving ahead is how can we now reconstitute our political elite in a way that they will pursue the public interest as defined under Chapter 2. And here I think the way politics is moving, people are now demanding more and more accountability from our political leaders. I think also it's important to say that one of the more sad aspects of this dissonance between processes and outcomes is the fact that we have devalued our institutions. Our institutions are not being what they should serve. We find everywhere institutions being used to pursue political goals, political agendas against political opponents. And that has been a permanent feature of our political history since independence, or even since before independence. So I think it's important, therefore, to look at the larger picture and see that the underlying problem is sort of this moving away from what I would call the moral and ethical anchors of democratic government.
Angles very, very pertinent. He talked about a military elite, business elite in Nigeria in trying to determine who belongs to a political class. But what we have seen over the years has been the fact that we have a free political space, where everybody, comes in. And when you now begin to determine who belongs to political class, it becomes a little bit difficult. But gentlemen, let me posit this to you. In political science, it is said that individual characters of officials in government, including the head of the government, the president or prime minister, determines to a large extent the direction of that nation in terms of economy, education, health, and in fact in all sectors of national development. And it does appear that personal character is not considered by the electorate and even those who are responsible for appointing people to positions of authority. While in other climes, your high school behavior could determine your political future. Now, something is missing here, and I'd like to bring in former Governor Chiku Denwa here. What is the matter?
The matter is actually the society in general. The Nigerian society has been so corrupted, has been, it's not just the political class. The Nigerian society is like a dirty pond of water. From there, you take water, you go into politics. From there, another water goes to NTA. Another goes to... So you find out that wherever this water goes, it is still bad water. This is part of our problem. This is what the society is all about. Look at our INEC. Honestly, there's no way you can get it right without INEC itself being right. It is the overall regulating body for our elections, for our political parties, for our political practice. So it has to be above board first. And from what you are saying, we have another problem. The society also has changed. When I started politics, I started it as a very young man. I was in my 20s. I didn't have a kobo. It wasn't a question of money. It's a question of an ideology, a question of what you believe in, a question of how you present yourself to your people. Even the political leaders at the time were not rich people. But today, a lot of people have grabbed the system, made money out of it, and become the real political bourgeois. Well, they should not be. Let us get to the root of the problem. The Nigerian society is bad. Some of these people who have hijacked the system don't understand it, understand what role money plays, and we all dance around them. We're no more asking them, what are you doing? How do you get about it? I know people who have been in one position or the other, elected position or the other, but they haven't won an election in the real sense of it. They've never won an election. The electorate has never elected them. But they are the big guys in politics. So these are things we must get back to. We must really find out who is the real politician. I know a lot of very good politicians who have been frustrated out of the system because they don't have the money, they don't have the, would I say, they can't buy the touts and all that, they can't be violent. But the society is accepting that some of these people whom we know are crooked. The society is saying these are real politicians. In fact, there's a place where you'll be talking, they say, this one, he's not a politician. He doesn't know, he can't do what politicians do. And to our own society, this is the definition of politics. If you can't be as crooked as others, you are not a politician. So let's get back and see where the problem is.
Well, that's why the point has also been made sometimes that, you know, politics is a dirty game and that you can't find decent persons in politics. I don't know. Senator Mamora, yesterday I asked the question to sort of probing into the mind of a politician. His Excellency Achike Udenwa talks about the fact that, look, we don't have a right INEC. But without being an advocate for INEC, let's look at it this way. INEC does not approach itself to wangle the outcome of an election. INEC does not foment crisis. INEC has no band of thugs that it hires to disrupt elections, to burn its own ballot boxes, to disrupt the process. INEC has its role as an umpire, but even then, its range is limited. So, why have we, as His Excellency also said, have this altered dynamics of the political process that you have politicians? And we use the phrase, you know, in a generic sense of political class, who are doing what they are doing and imposing their own values on the rest of society.
Well, thank you very much. I think there are certain words or phrases that have been recurrent in all this conversation. You know, values, very, very important. 2, the society itself. And of course, leadership. Now, when you put all this together, you see, in medicine, there is, we say that no matter what you're endowed with genetically, it cannot have full expression if you are not in the right environment. So we talk of genotype, we talk of phenotype, which phenotype is the environment where you find yourself. So no matter what is deposited in you that you have inherited, you know, from your parents, you know, that genetic thing, the full expression is dependent on the environment. So that's where the society comes in. So in all this, I'm saying that the fault is in us. Wherever you find people talk of political class or the political elite, whether in the legislature, in the executive, or in the judiciary, all these institutions, they still mirror the society. So that's why we talk of societal values. Even our constitution recognizes national ethics. And all these things are stated there. But we have, I mentioned in my introductory remarks, you know, the issue of desperation and people going into politics for wrong reasons. Primarily, politics has to be for service. Service to your community, service to your country, service to humanity. That's where it should be. But are we really doing that? Do people go to politics for the right reasons generally now? Then who are the people that we hail? Are they the people who really uphold the values that people will appreciate in the society? And then the leadership recruitment process. Who are the people who make themselves available for election? What is their pedigree? Where are they coming from? What is the background? What are they bringing to the table? Do we probe into all this? The answer is no. Most of the time, it's a question of how much. That's why, I mean, that's where the concept of money bags came into our political lexicon. Money bags. That, look, the people who just, and people are not, they can't be bothered where these so-called money bags got the money from. They just bring the money into the system and they throw it around and they buy all the buyables, if you like, in the system. So for me, it's even if some people, rightly or wrongly, want to accuse INEC, the officials in INEC, they are from our society as well. So everything, the institutions, they mirror. They mirror this, and that's why I remember in 2015, the presidential campaign thing, that what the party stands for, we just, there are three things we must rebuild. We must first is to have a rebirth, national rebirth, then rebuild, and then of course they reintroduce, as it were, the values. They are so critical. That's what we need to do. We must rebuild our institutions. The institutions that have become dilapidated, we must rebuild them. We must restore values into the system. Because the system, the systems must be such that can go on, because individuals come, individuals go. But the systems should be such that we need to put values back and then, uphold the right values in the system.
Yes, a leadership recruitment process, very apt, because that was one of the fundamentals of the question I put to former Governor Chiko Udenwa. Now, what has been playing out significantly in our polity has been this issue of godfatherism that Kingsley just mentioned. Some states have been hijacked by certain political class, impose their will on the people, and of course determine who gets what, when, and how. And that has culminated into gradual should I say, gradual bringing down of the local government system to its knees by the political class. And I am asking this question to Jibril Kena, who has been a local government chairman, and of course the chairman of Argon in the past. I wouldn't know whether he was chairman when we were having a zero. Exactly. Now, a public secretary, rather, of Argon. So, what actually, happened to this level of government, which is believed to be closer to the people, and be able to, feel the pulse of the people and produce, or rather, deliver what the people needs. What happened, Jibril?
Well, just before I go into that, if you don't mind, I have two statements to make. One, to say that I think all hopes are not lost. What I spoke on before was the historical perspective. The contemporary perspective of what is happening is that all of us should be very glad that we have produced enough retirees who have tested power and who are frustrated now because of the consequences of their actions when they were in office. The volume of the turnover of so-called political elites today is frightening, but also helping in reconstructing the society into time. Because these are people who have tested power, and they can see that when they were in office, they didn't do what was right of them to do, including myself. And so now that we have seen that some other values have overcome us, have taken over us, and they are not doing even one-third of what we are doing, it behoves on us, on the retired political elites, so-called now, to go back home now and start to redraw, to start to reintroduce elements, and not to just stay laid back and think that some form of miracle will come. The second layer of it is the leadership we have today. The emergent leadership that we have today, even from the last elections, is enough of a pointer that the country may find its footing in the course of time. There are epochal election results today that show us that money didn't play as much as it's supposed to have been or assumed to be playing. and that value or the integrity of the people or the person has played out sufficiently. And that electorates are also beginning to decipher between parties and individuals whom they believe have certain values that may help the cause of their needs. 3, we have a recent court ruling, Supreme Court ruling, pronouncement, that said that an executive officer should not be precluded from being prosecuted for owning wealth that is far beyond his recognized and legitimate sources of income. That should be extended to the civil servant. That should be extended to the traditional ruler. That should be extended to the road transport worker. The law, once it comes to play its role, or is allowed, is encouraged to begin to take effect, particularly this recent ruling, it's not about 3 weeks old, this ruling, is a fundamental yardstick to cause elected officers now in government to sit up. Fourthly, the encouragement of non-governmental organizations, real ones. No matter what it is, non-governmental organizations are seen to have this value in the society that they are not as corrupt. So the rules that we all who are not in government or in the platforms of governance today have a role to encourage the emergence of this in our small communities. Going home more frequently, visiting during birthdays, during naming ceremonies, during burials, and speaking to our people and reintroducing this value. Because if we don't reintroduce the value that the society has already accepted to make it the norm, the country is going to have a long shot to be able to recover itself. But that also brings back to where we got it wrong from the first place. That leadership must evolve from the community. Even as a young man, if I must give an example again, we had an association of our community, and everybody always aspired to be the president of the society. And with due respect, I propounded that let us not have a general president. Let everybody go back and form this association in his village. Once you become the president of the village, we now form a council of presidents who will rotate as it does in OAU. That will make you go back home and reintroduce yourself, perform and make yourself, seen to be capable to lead. And for the situation we have found ourselves today, Mr. President has obligation to wake up to the obligation of the office, because there are perceptions that are not totally lost. If the last 4 years has not been as expected of us, we have an opportunity now, even though we have court cases coming in, but he has obligation now to kickstart, to focus on what the need of the country is and what they expected of him to do in the first place, which was to give a rebirth to the value system that made him popular during the 1993 and 1983 emergence as president of this country, which was discipline. If you can be seen to be taking disciplinary action and activities and decisions on people who are around you immediately, it will permeate. And today, no governor, no executive has ever performed beyond coming to you to request for. I keep saying this. The president has opportunity to give a rebirth program to this country. And until that becomes the norm, that everybody should wake up, I have obligation to society. This wealth that I have, somebody is going to question me tomorrow, and that it can start from now. We are going to have a long way to be able to begin a new Nigeria creation.
All right, Honorable Jibril Kiyana, thank you very much. And gentlemen, we're taking a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll continue with the conversation.
Chief, good morning, sir. You are here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Better.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back, and I say good morning, Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Well, of course, you've been listening to our guests, and they've all made very useful points. I hope we have enough time. There are two issues raised by Honorable Kiana that I would like the guests to also touch on. One, that's not immediate, by the way. So one, of course, has to do with what would appear to be a thumbs up, if you like, for the KBAC syndrome, which is part of our culture, versus the democratic tenets that we have, which it says, of course, has not been planted on fertile soil. Plus the fact that we're having now an increasing pool of retired politicians who have the benefit, as it were, of hindsight. But yesterday, when we started this conversation, and indeed for a while, and my question is going to Professor Adele Jinodu. Part of what has often come up has to do with the nature of our electoral system. That the first past the post system, which is winner take all, creates this intense competition, the do or die disposition that political office seekers often have, and that it might be different if we had proportional representation. Does our current electoral system, where, for instance, the party scores 1 million votes and another party scores 990-something thousand votes, those 990-something thousand votes virtually go to waste, and then the 1 million votes, as it were, take the trump. Is there something that we need to tinker with in our electoral system?
I think we need to look at some form of proportional representation. Married with the elements of the winner takes all that we have now, the first past the post. But what is more important, I think, is providing, as the Waste Committee report has suggested, some threshold of votes or representation in the assembly, which will guarantee some ministerial or cabinet or other executive-based appointments to political parties other than those who have won elections to be represented in the cabinet. I think that is important we look at that. In other places, it has served some useful purpose in diffusing political conflict. But I think the other aspect of the winner takes all is the amount of power that is invested in presidential and governorship appointments. I think we see after each change in administration, a whole set of people, political appointees, leave and new ones are appointed. I think we should have a way of curtailing presidential powers in a way which will reduce the power of patronage that the president has. So I think it's important that we start looking at that. Also, some form of representation, proportional representation for women and other marginal groups can be built into the system to ensure more inclusivity in our appointments. But I just want to make one point. You see, political leaders have a duty to rise above society in transforming society. So we cannot just say the society itself is at blame. In fact, that is why we have political leaders, to transform society in a way that will serve the common purpose. What we have been having here is an irresponsible, well, in a very loose sense, a political leadership that has not risen above society, but is in fact manipulating some of the elements that divide society, ethnic, religious, or what have you. So I think let us be clear that society is important, but as a check on the leadership. But above all, the political leadership has that role of not mirroring society, but in fact going beyond society to transform it. And I think that is the problem that we have. The other point I think that needs to be made is that we need to look at, somebody talked about political recruitment, and we need to look at the nature and structure of our political parties. And I think that is also a fundamental problem. In terms of the political parties, again, have not really tried to go above and beyond society, but are in fact making more complex some of the problems that are dividing us in the country.
Thank you very much. Kingsley, I want
I know that you want to make a point. But just to re-emphasize before you pop your question, the point that, one of the points that Professor Adele Jinodu just made now is a re-echo, as it were, of what Professor Sam Ego also said yesterday on the program.
Good.
That, look, a class must be capable of reinventing or recreating itself, as well as reinventing and recreating society.
Exactly.
You cannot blame society and say, oh, the problem is with the society. Now, you as a class, whether a business class, but in this case we are discussing the political class, you reinvent yourself, reinvent society, and then everybody grows.
Of course. And the question you asked on why we go to battle each time there is election is what I'm going to ask Honorable Darlington Nwokocha to talk about. And there is also this issue of the salaries and other remunerations of people in political offices. Well, somebody pointed out yesterday on social media, I hope that was right, to say that a Nigerian senator earns more than the U.S. president. Because there is a drive, there's a reason for people to want to fight and kill, to get there. Right. And it is not new in Nigeria. Recall in the 60s, between 64 and 65, Nigeria had a turbulent political situation, where, of course, the then OPGA and the National Alliance had issues that made Nigeria not to have any head of state for 2 days. Because of electoral aftermath of an election, that period. So, why is it that we have to fight to get there?
Well, I think, let me just say briefly on the first issue of what we have on ground concerning political education vis-a-vis the way forward, before I come to that of salary and other things. Just briefly. You see, you cannot give what you don't have. And I want us to understand that elections, politicking is not an event, it's a process. Like as we're discussing right now, we look at situations, okay, we're talking about the election that just happened. It's a process that started more than 4 years ago, 4 years ago before the time we had this election. So we need to ask ourselves, what have we been doing concerning orientation, education, and other things within our areas now to that point of election? If you see what happened of recent, just during the election, you could feel the zeal of people trying to do the right thing. Oh, let's go and vote. Oh, let's go and vote. The zeal was so much. It's just a natural phenomenon. When you look out for something and you say, "This, I want to get it right this time," and along the line, it's been aborted, you feel highly disappointed somehow in that process. Because that disappointment was not achieved or happened that day of election. There are a few things that must have happened that now generated some doubts in the society. Say, are you sure that we're going to get it right this time? And when the zeal keep going down, then they may display whatever action they feel that will find succor to whatever zeal that must have pushed them into action on the day of that particular action. That is just by the way. I think you asked about why do people now strive to cling to a particular position.
Members of the political class.
Yes. You see, like I said earlier, political class, which kind of people are in that class?
Those who are striving for business. As His Excellency Udenwa said, that politics has become a business. And Kirian is also asking that the financial incentive, the reward, for political office, it's the driving force rather than, service orientation.
Yes.
That's the point.
That is it. So that's what quality of people are in that class you are talking about. You see a situation where, like you mentioned, godfatherism. somebody will just fly in from somewhere, not being known within the vicinity that he's going to represent, for instance, in any class, and there is somebody like a political father figure that will present himself as somebody that will now be in between himself. Maybe his money is being channeled through that father figure, political father figure. Now they're seeing that political father figure as somebody, oh, this man has said it, then let's support that his stooge. And at the end of the day, he will now recompense him for whatever position he must stand in for. That is not it. Like he said rightly, for instance, when you do some comparative analysis between here and what happens outside this country where we borrowed their own style of democracy, for you to step out to run for a particular position, you must have been either a PTA chairman within your area. They must have seen you as somebody that's quite conversant in certain administrative tendencies. So, oh, this person can chair a particular position within the school area, and the school and other things are working well within their community. Therefore, this man can step forward to the local government, to the state, and to the national. But that is not it here. There is no test ground to put somebody, oh, let's test this person, whether he has the competencies, whether he has the qualities that could now help our vicinity to grow to another level. And you know that all environments are not the same. Whatever that works in a particular area will not suit the other area as well. So what kind of leadership suits a particular area? So when you look at this thing, you see that, oh, we want to go there, let's go and make all the money. Like I said earlier, so many people resign from good and juicy positions to launch into a particular position and reaching there. Yes, but that is it. No, the incentive, that is an anticipation. That is an anticipation. We'll have a senator here, and I'm sure today, maybe when he was a senator, he wasn't in this same party where he is today. But if you ask him now from the all perspective, say, what is the situation with that enumeration you're talking about? He will give you, and I'm sure from the legislative angle, we've discussed this issue severally. My 8th Assembly has come up openly to say all the things we have always made. But people always feel that there are some hints behind other funds that accrue to us. Okay, let's go into that place. And when they run into that place and find out, oh, so I resigned from this easy job and this is not. And you cannot go back there again. Then the only thing is that you keep fighting to make sure that you remain there. So that you don't lose always.
Precisely. Honorable Nwokocha, thanks a lot. You're speaking from the legislative perspective, but we also know about the executive perspective, you know, whether at the state level or at the local government level, which is why my question is going to Honorable, His Excellency Achike Odenwa. Look, there's no, some would say that what we are having in the Fourth Republic is actually plutocracy. That is the government of the wealthy, you know, the so-called godfathers whose rule have also impacted negatively on the leadership recruitment process. The question therefore arises not whether or not the godfathers exist. We know that they do exist, and driven by the philosophy that you need money to spend money to chase more money into your coffers. How can the influence of the godfathers be attenuated? Do we encourage the EFCC to also go after the godfathers so that they can begin to see, as Honorable Kiana said, you know, measure their wealth versus their legitimate sources of income? How can the role of the godfathers, because they are the ones, you know, who determine who gets in, and after a while you now begin to have aspirant godfathers themselves who want to break free from the control. Your Excellency, that is why you are having clashes between those who will handpick their successors as governors, and then later you say, no, I want to be my own man, because now you have your financial muscle. And somehow to
from their party, sponsoring somebody else.
Big time. How do you do that, Your Excellency?
Well, I hope, well, I've been a customer of the AFCC, so I hope you are not bringing them back to me. Honestly, this is one of the problems of our system. These so-called godfathers, I can tell you, I know some of the godfathers, and I know distinguished senator knows some. Some of them are, they are never do well people. Let me put it that way. It's not that they are anything extraordinary, anything very intelligent, anything, but just that they are hustlers. Yes, when you say godfather, I know many of them. Hustlers, gamblers, people who can gamble, people who have nothing to show. When you go close, I know some of them were my colleagues. So I know them very well. So the issue we are having in this country, you see, it still boils down to what I said earlier. As you are, nobody wants to know your track record. What everybody is interested in is how much is he bringing? That's right. And with this money, they buy anything. Even buy the EFCC you're talking about. But the EFCC is not, I don't believe they are buyable. So
they attempt.
They attempt to buy.
Honorable Kiana. All right, sorry, very quickly.
No, what I'm trying to say...
How do we deal with the godfathers?
Yes, we deal with the godfathers by really, I say, cut them to size. And how do we cut them to size, you will ask me. They are not very brilliant people. They are not, I can tell you. But they are, good impostors.
Going for them.
They have a deep pocket.
It's not only the pocket, but they can do all the showmanship.
As Nigerians would say, Honorable Kiana, from the field, give us your experience. How do you think that the role of God... We're not talking about political mentors, actually. We're talking about these money bags, who pollute the system and therefore ratchet up the intense competition for power that others also now seek to become godfathers themselves.
The only way is to use the manpower that have over the time collected. Because there are at least 11 chairmen in my community today. And all of us are stakeholders by our right. The pool, even during the last election, for example, in my community, everybody now knew, did we really do the right thing during the processes of putting candidates forward? There is this reflection now going in the system. That's the only way to curb the excesses of so-called money bags. But for a long time to come, the psychology of this will continue to override every good initiative. But the only way to stop it is for Mr. President today to start a journey of recreating Nigeria, where new values are introduced and where the law must be seen and to begin to be implemented, where you must declare why you have the wealth you have versus legitimate sources of income. And so anybody who has incomes that are not comparative to what he is supposed to have earned legitimately will begin to be afraid.
We'll stop it off now and get your last take on this. Briefly, please.
Well, for me, I think it's education, education, education.
And Wokocha?
Yeah, I think I align myself completely like I earlier said. Political education is very key, from the basement to the topmost, so that it can imbibe the character of ethics, value, and norms.
All right, thank you. Professor Jinadu, please, your final thoughts on this. Very briefly, please.
It is about time that professional associations rise up to demand accountability from the political elite across the political spectrum. Because unless professionals uphold their professional ethics, unless they refuse to be complicit and to work with the political elite to steal the public purse, then we are not going anywhere. It is not just an individual who is going to do it. The professionals as a group, lawyers, accountants, intellectuals, nurses, everybody, we must all stand up and say it is now time that we lead by our professional ethics. And until we do that, and studies elsewhere have shown that unless the professional groups stand up, the political class or the political elite will not commit class suicide or elite. They must be forced. It is not, we are...
Professor Gina, we thank you indeed. We are actually running out of time. Kingsley, we have some tweets here. Let's just brush it out as fast as we can. Victoria Tabak, INEC did not fail us, but our politicians did. They can kill and maim in the quest for power.
Law Alpha said, now the desperation and the driving ambition exhibited by politicians in a bid to woo votes from the electorate should be discouraged forthwith.
Chris Ogugamba, so far our discussions are harping on the problems which are well known to all, but I am not hearing much about the solutions.
Well, I'm sure if you listened more closely, you would have
had some solutions.
Yes, some solutions. Now, Omako J tweets, after the presidential election, more than half of the electorate that participated refused to come out for the governorship and state House of Assembly elections. Now, what does that suggest to us? It's simply a message that if our votes are not counted, what is the point of participating?
And Victoria Tabak, unless we review the pay of the politicians, especially the legislators, pay less attractive, these menace of politicians will continue. Recall that just when President Kenyatta came on board in Kenya, members of the National Assembly in that country, actually agreed, to reduce their pay, and it happened.
Absolutely. Well, it's on that note we'd like to thank all our guests this morning for their contributions to our discussion. First, appreciation to Chief Achike Udenwa, His Excellency, former Governor of Imo State. Thank you very much for being with us on the program this morning.
Thank you, viewers.
Okay, we also would like to appreciate distinguished Senator Olorundumbe Mamora, the current CEO of the National Inland Waterways, NIWA. Distinguished Senator, thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Appreciation also to Honorable Jibril Sabo Kiana, former chairman, Kiana Local Government Area of Nasarawa State. Thanks a lot for being with us.
A pleasure.
And Honorable Darlington Nwankocha, a member of the House of Representatives, representing the constituency in Abia State. Thank you for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
In Lagos, we were joined by Professor of Political Science, Adele Jinodu. Thank you very much, Prof, for your contribution to our talk this morning. Okay, so that does it for us today. We are back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. I'm Kingsley.
And I'm Kieran. It's been nice having you this morning. Join us again tomorrow for more on Good Morning Nigeria.